Let's get into it.
Sure. I want to rock and roll all night and party every day. It's a line from a Kiss song for you young
Yes, it
people that have
is.
no idea who that is.
Welcome to How Did We Get Here, the podcast where each week our two talking heads, being myself, Jess Bost,
and Mark Newfield,
bring on guests to learn more about their past 5 jobs before landing where they are today.
Because, as you know, life is super simple, straightforward, and never makes people ask, wait, you did what?
Join us for an honest convo on career exploration, overcoming setbacks, considering when to pivot, and offering encouragement on how to find value in your career and life choices.
And with that, let's ask the question.
Holy crap, how did I get here? Together.
Hey, folks, we're back. Today, we're chatting with Julie Johnson, a phenomenal human being who is helping advisors tackle one of the most important issues in this business today, and that's generational wealth transfer. And if you haven't read about it, well, you ought to. If you don't know about it and you're an advisor, you might want to think about getting out of the business. But in any case, Julie is phenomenal, and what a conversation we had.
Yeah, I've known Julie for a while. Cannot agree more. She's, as we'll learn through a little bit of this conversation today, she's got the experience as an advisor. She's got a heart of a lion, and just even training from places like Brene Brown's Dare to Lead Training Institute and some other coaching things that she's bolted on. Her mission and what she focuses on now is equipping advisors to help their people make effective changes, and equipping advisors and their clients to make those effective changes. She kind of works within the business itself and then also down to the client level. Her approach is gentle but firm. I like that lion, and to help them see their blind spots in a way that allows them to move forward instead of staying stuck. And so much of that I'll call tenderheartedness from her comes from the hard-earned and tough experiences in her life, which Mark, you and I were talking about, some of those life experiences you just got to have before we hopped on. And, some of that, which she was willing to share with us, it was really moving. And I was really grateful that she was willing to go there with us.
It actually takes a lot of courage to be that open.
Yeah.
You don't see that in a lot of people.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things that tells me that it's genuine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because right from the very beginning, she shared why she became a financial advisor. So, by the way, folks, she's just not a marketing person or a messaging person to help advisors. She's been an advisor,
Yeah.
and by all rights had a very successful advisory practice. And she shared with us too why she stopped doing that as well, or moved off of it. But she shared her own personal experiences, which when you get down to it and you really understand this business, you know that people's money story is what shapes all their money behavior.
Yeah.
It shapes a lot of our behavior, whether we understand it or not, money or not. But her own parents had significant financial issues, and that shaped her behavior and what she chose to do. And that's how she started the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I always have two feelings that I'm holding at the same time when an advisor, someone in our industry shares that they had a tough financial experience, which led them into being a part of this industry and trying to make a difference and making a change. And like, there's one part of me that's just, it's so hard to hear. And I am once again just frustrated that it took a bad experience for someone to figure out a way forward. But the other side of it, the flip side of that coin is gratitude, because now with that person, I automatically feel more sure that they're in this for the right reasons. And, being that financial advisor to someone else, they're not just looking at it from a number standpoint, they're looking at it from a how to help them prevent the mistakes and make it through the struggles that they've personally been through. And that just lends so much more depth to the conversation, to the process. And so, yeah, I'm with you. I appreciated her sharing her story, and it was also at the same time, it was tough to hear.
Which kind of gives me two thoughts. Um, One is for you advisors out there, if you're struggling and you're wondering whether it's worth it to be in this business, it 100% is.
Hmm.
Actually, I'm going to go with three thoughts. The second is for those of us already in the business, it's really validating when you see others that have taken a path similar to what you and I have taken and it works and you see how it helps people. And the third one is for you clients, when you find a good advisor, they may not be perfect. They may make mistakes. We all do, by the way. But when you find a good advisor that's got the right heart and the right motivation, stick with them.
Yeah.
I mean, unless they really screw up, but they're going to do the right thing for you.
That's
And
cool.
so I think the balance, right, of
Mm.
and we talk often with advisors and people that we work with to not always be the one talking, more often be the one listening. And I often refer back to my parents. My dad was the talker, my mom was the listener. So together they made a great team and they did it in a very respectful way. But anyway, so I knew they had something happen to them when I was in my late teens that um, pretty much decimated their finances, and it was because they hadn't planned for the unplanned,
Mm.
as that is so often the story, right? That this occurred, and it was no one's fault, right? It wasn't anybody's fault. But that was what I often ask when I'm working with an advisor or doing public speaking or whatever, what's your story, right? And so that is the reason why I became a financial advisor, is I never wanted anyone to have to go through that, if at all possible, for them to prevent it.
Another thing that she talked about was her experience on the, wirehouse on the, Merrill Lynch and JP Morgan side of the business. For you folks who don't know what a wirehouse is, those are two examples. And how back, in the late 90s, and maybe it's just because I'm old, but that doesn't seem so long ago, you know, 25 years, 30 years. In the scheme of your life as you age, that won't feel like a very long time either. This industry wasn't the most welcoming or collaborative place for women. And I think I can argue that in a lot of places it still isn't.
Yeah.
It's actually a motivator for me and some of the work that I do with advisors. And I mean, I have a consulting business too, and that's part of that. I'd love to see the change that's happening. I mean, you see, I think RFG has a female CEO, right?
Yeah.
We do a journey. I saw that. Gosh, I've forgotten her name. Sally Krawcheck just stepped down, but there are a lot of things that are changing,
Yeah.
which is awesome. But this particular point is a big reason why Julie is so committed to helping others,
Yeah.
and I applaud her for that. It's not an easy thing to do.
Along with that, why she advocates for people to pay attention to their mental health, and for the industry as a whole to make mental health more of an accepted topic to discuss, and to that it is important to bring to the forefront, not just for advisors, but for their clients and for the financial planning conversations too. And it's so good to see that change happening as well. And of course, that came out in her conversation too.
Honestly, I've been in the, again, I want to be careful. I don't mean to say that
Yeah.
everyone were jerks, but and especially in the wirehouse space, right? It was just very competitive, super territorial. We built a team of 12 people. In 2007, we had almost 2 billion in assets under management, and we loved our clients. They were wonderful, and by all accounts, I refer to it as my Facebook persona. Everything looked great. And however, there were a lot of things that were going on both within my team, within our industry, that caused me to really struggle. I was in some situations, professionally, abroad the country, across the country, where I didn't have my own voice. I was required to fall into a communication style that was very much more transactional, less relationship driven. And it didn't feel authentic and conducive to who I was as a human being. Honestly, I wasn't appreciated. Not that it's about me being appreciated, it was always about our clients. But it wasn't until 2008, 2009 when I won an award for being one of the top 5 people to close referrals in all of UBS. And people who knew me even said, "Oh, I guess you do know what you're doing." And I was just like, wow. you know, because we work with people that if you don't do it their way or the way they feel it's accurate and correct, then it's wrong. So in 2010, for many, many, many different reasons, I left the industry. I took some time off, and a lot of it was stress related. And so, thank you to Jason Lahita is another person who there's so many people now in our industry, men and women, who are talking about stress as so that it's not taboo, right? It's not taboo to talk about having a tough time. It's not taboo to talk about imposter syndrome or any of the things. But, just a mere 10 years ago, hey, yesterday, for many of us, it felt taboo to talk about stress. So I left the industry for a while, and I was in a very, very dark place. And I felt like I had failed, even though I knew I hadn't. But at that point in time, I felt that way. There's a lot that I'm not talking about, but it just is. I want this conversation to serve the majority of the listeners so that they know that if they are experiencing stress or if they are experiencing some issues that are causing them to second guess themselves, to any extreme, get help, talk to people, don't feel alone, find other people, because there are so many people who are struggling, and know that you're not alone.
And it's tough. I mean, as an advisor, I've had more than one client that I've counseled to go get help. That, in my opinion, be that whatever it's worth, they needed therapeutic help beyond what I could do in my capacity as their financial advisor.
Yeah.
And I know lots of people joke and say that many a good financial advisor is often a marriage counselor, and that is true to a certain extent. But we're not mental health professionals.
That's right.
This is a big deal.
That's right. Yeah.
And she had the courage to talk about that too, but getting a grip on your mental health is part of what it takes to grow.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Yeah.
And growth is hard. Doesn't matter whether you're lifting weights or running. I'm a bicyclist, right? I can tell you right now, getting beyond mile 30 is a hard thing for me to do.
Yeah.
Doing 7% grades is hard. But the only way you can do it is to do it. Yeah. Which was the brilliance of the Nike Just Do It campaign, to go down a little rabbit hole. But, that's what this is all about. How did we get here? What did we face on that path? And how can you, me, you, our guests, create a space where we can talk about the pressures we face and maybe help others find a path forward when maybe they don't think there is. Yeah. I mean, I'd look at my own story. I mean, I've flunked out of college 3 times. There are a lot of things that if they didn't happen right, I wouldn't be here today. And I think that's true of everyone. And your ability, I'm not saying that your whole life is a grind and you need to grind it out. Sometimes you need to stop and say, I'm not going to grind on this. There are times when you need to say no. There are times, and Annie Duke wrote a book about quitting. There are times when quitting is the right thing to do. And it's culturally a negative, but it's probably the right thing to do. But talking about the pressure we face is a huge thing. And by the way, if you ever want to talk to me, I'm here for you if I can be of any help. And Julie was a wonderful guest to bring this up and have an open conversation. Just amazing.
for me, it's my job to show up for, the advisors that I get to work with, or management that I get to work with, or, whomever hires me to help them build trust and to help them break the logjam in the lack of communication that's occurring for whatever reason, right? We all have reasons we get in our own way. There are so many ways to just talk with people to help us get out of our own way. The biggest thing that I really want, if there's a few things that people come away from this recording hearing, is I want them to hear you are not alone. No matter what you're experiencing and how you're wanting to handle it, if you know that what you're doing is the best thing for your clients, don't give up. Maybe, figure out doing it a different way, and get help. But just because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong, especially when you know that it's serving people. The other thing is many, 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 many of us are haunted every day by imposter syndrome, right? Who the heck are we to get to, go out and tell our story and help people? And who do we think we are that we know something that someone else is going to want help with, right? All of us go through this. The best of the best, Brene Brown, Simon Sinek, all of the best, they go through it. Just, again, I guess, don't give up and keep striving to be the best you can be. And if you are not happy where you are, or you're not happy with the people that you're working with, there are other people out there. I don't mean to say it's easy to make a change, or that you should make a change, but don't silence your voice.
I already knew this about her spirit, I guess, just intuitively from conversations I've had with her in the past. But what she said in our discussion and in our interview with her solidified it for me, that so much of her journey has been about figuring out, and she didn't say it with these exact words, but as I reflect on it, I know this is it. She has been figuring out her ikigai. And if you haven't looked up that term, it's spelled Ikigai. It is a Japanese term that sits at the center of four things: what you love, what the world needs, what you're good at, and what you can be paid for. And just so much of our conversation with Julie was about her walking us through the tension of what she loved to do, what she figured out that the world needed with this wealth transfer and with women and financial services, and what she's good at, which is helping people build trust and communication, and, what she can be paid for, which she talked a lot about the tension between what she's good at and what she could be paid for, and what she loved and felt right in her soul to do. And it was just this, we just danced around those four things until we finally circled in on what she has found now today that she's good at. And I asked a question at one point, said, at what age were you the happiest in your life? And she said, now. And she gave her age on the podcast, but she's in her 50s. And so she talked about the age where she felt like she was the most.
She's decades behind me, by the way.
The age when she felt like she was the most lost was in her 40s. I felt really encouraged by that. That if you're out there and you feel like you still haven't figured out your thing, your ikigai, that middle of all of those four things, what you love, what the world needs, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, just keep going. Rest when you need to, but keep going. And it's out there and it's there for you. And it's okay that you haven't figured it out yet.
I had this internal struggle of the term keeping up with the Joneses, right?
Yeah.
Wanting the better house, the better car, all the things that I saw other people have, just not ever being comfortable doing something that I couldn't get behind, or look at myself in the mirror at the end of the day. Conversations I couldn't, if I couldn't sell myself on something, I sure as heck wasn't going to sell someone else.
Yeah.
And were there times one could argue I was wrong? Absolutely. Of course. Did I often have to tell myself and remind myself, Julie, this isn't about you, it's about them? Especially as I got older in my career, I'm like, all right, am I doing this because it's giving me fear and trepidation? Am I holding back, and am I ingratiating myself too much into this decision making? And do I need to back off and do what's best for them? And, I got old enough and wiser that I knew when to kind of have that boundary and be like, okay, selfishly, I wouldn't do this, but their risk tolerance, their situations, their what have you, says go for it. They know all the things, they want to do it. Anyway, what was really hard too, Jess, was there were enough times in meetings in front of clients or in front of peers that I was told that my way of doing things was wrong. And, there's a way to handle it, right? You can handle it privately. You can have the discussion privately. Don't do it in front of peers. Don't do it in front of clients. It's very unprofessional. It's very degrading. It really broke my spirit. It really, really broke my spirit. And sadly, I still see that happening with teams that I coach, market execs, advisors, doesn't matter. And so it's figuring out, okay, how do you advocate for yourself? How do you stand up without being disrespectful? And I didn't know how to do that then. Or I didn't know how to do it in a way that would capture their attention, right? And that's the difference, is figuring out how to, if you know that what you want to fight for, advocate for has meaning and has value, then figure out how to say it to the person where it's going to resonate with that person. And they're going to hear why it's important and why it benefits, multiple people. And that's what the difference is. I think it wasn't about me. Make it about the client, because that's what it's about. Make it about whomever the end user is. Make it about them. And it oftentimes people will hear that a lot better.
Yeah, and it's equally funny that, I mean, if you've listened to this podcast at all, you probably realize that a similar path. I stopped in my 40s and completely changed direction. And I didn't know this about her. I mean, I had shaken her hand at a conference once, and that's all I knew about Julie,
Yeah.
other than, reading posts and things like that. We have very similar paths. So this might be my confirmation bias at work, right? But this conversation just got better and better
Yeah.
and better. And she was amazingly open and sharing. She wants to help others. That just comes out so cleanly. And she was able to relate some tough times in her life. And I said it before and I'll say it again. This takes courage. It's brave. And I will tell you, listen to her, follow her. If you're struggling, she's going to be helpful.
Yeah.
And I don't want to volunteer her time, but I'd be willing to bet that if you reached out to her and said, I'm in this phase of my life and struggling, she would find a way to help.
I agree.
She's just that kind of person.
So for me, it was finding literally the right authors, the right podcasts, I'm a listener as opposed to a reader. Different people enjoy content in different ways. For me, it was putting on literally the right podcast, the right audio book, the right song. A lot of times it would be watching old Friends episodes, things that would just literally make me laugh. For me, oftentimes when the imposter syndrome would rear its ugly head, I would go back to people that I knew were similar in values, similar in thinking, that had become successful, and be like, okay, if they can do it, I can do it. What do I need to be doing that's different? Because for me, Jess, often it was me that got in my own way. I reacted too strongly to something that somebody said, or I didn't have a thick enough skin, or in fact, excuse my language, they are an asshole, but I can't change that. So what control do I have? Because at the end of the day, I got to get up. I got to, earn my paycheck, or, for me, I'm self-employed. I got to show up for my clients. I've got to do my marketing outreach. I got to do the things, because if I don't, it's me that it's negatively affecting.
Hmm.
And so why should I let that person negatively affect me when really it's me negatively affecting me? And trust me, there are plenty days when I didn't get out of bed. And it took a really long time. And man, COVID was a really, 2020 worst year business wise ever. Super scary, right? And I think it just was talking to people. It was literally, LinkedIn was my savior, and networking with people and talking to people. And anyway, that's kind of that was my thing. And different things work on different days too. Have you noticed that? I mean, literally different things work on different days. So it's like, okay, if the first thing isn't working, then try something else. And you know what else too? There were days that I didn't get out of bed and I slept or whatever. And the next day I felt better. So if you have a choice and you're just like, I need to take a day, and you have that convenience, maybe sometimes give it to yourself. Just let yourself take it and try again tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. I also appreciated what you shared in our conversation, Mark, as well, about how to get through hard times and some of your experiences along your journey and your decades and decades of experience and the things that you've learned, and a little tease for people to go back, listen to the full conversation, because your part, Julie's, a little bit of Julie's story is in there, a good bit of Julie's story in there, but unless they go back to the full conversation, they're going to miss yours, which is something that I found meaningful, and so go back, hear that part, guys. Before we wrap up, we want to just express once again to Julie, thank you for sharing your experiences, for being open, so honest in a loving and kind way, and just sharing insights that you've come to through hard-earned experience. There's a lot more we didn't cover, so again, I hope you'll come back and catch the full episode if you're listening to this one now, when that goes out. But just an incredibly valuable conversation.
Yes, indeed. Julie, we thank you. I thought highly of you anyway, just from reading about you, but it's clear that you're just a truly special human being. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for being here as somebody who has an influence on our industry.
All right, Mark, it's time. Let's get into it.
Sure. I want to rock and roll all night and party every day. It's a line from a Kiss song for you young
Yes, it
people that have
is.
no idea who that is, but
Yes, it
Jess
is.
is just old enough to know what I'm talking about.
Just old enough. Oh, as we've been talking about generational differences, Mark, and the great wealth transfer, as Julie touched on in our conversation with her, it is clear to me that building and preserving wealth across generations is top of mind for many people, but specifically for many of our clients that are seeking out financial planning and financial management services. So whether it's planning for the next generation or ensuring a legacy is protected, there are some important steps that financial advisors can take to make sure wealth is passed down effectively. And Mark, from your experience with working with clients, I would love to hear your thoughts on a few things. So I'll start with this first question. What are some of the biggest challenges that clients face when it comes to transferring wealth to the next generation, and how can they prepare for those challenges?
I think the first is mindset
Mm.
for the parents or whoever is the wealth holder, in that many of them are, we've had discussions, I think, and I know Matt Ziegler has, about accidental entrepreneurism, and so is Morgan Randstrom, right?
Yeah.
A lot of these folks are, I'd say, quote, accidentally, unquote, wealthy.
Mm.
They didn't intend or ever think they were going to end up with $2 million in an IRA,
They just worked
or,
hard.
or a home that's worth a couple $1,000,000
Yeah.
and is paid for,
Yeah.
right? They just saved, and the magic of compounding did its work.
Hmm.
It's not magic, folks, it's math.
Yeah.
But people feel like it's magic, a lot of people.
Yeah.
You have to come to grips, first of all, as the wealth holder, with what wealth do you have? And then the second part of it is, how much of it do you actually need?
Mm.
I think we probably both speak to lots of clients who don't believe they're going to have anything left to give.
Right.
And whether they believe that it's going to be the collapse of our financial system, or, they're just fundamentally nervous about giving when they're still spending, or any one of a number of things, you then have to come to grips with, do I actually have something to give? And then, of course, you have to think about the timing of it.
Hmm.
And I'll take two examples. I have an aunt who has some excess wealth, and she's one of those folks. And by the way, she's in her mid 90s and not spending any of her principal, period. I mean, her principal is growing, but her mindset is, whatever's left when I'm done gets given away, to her family. And, there's a couple different mindsets. I mean, first of all of us who might be recipients are well into our 60s. Right. So we've made our own way.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do with this now? Um, well, some of us might buy a Porsche. Some of us might have actually already done that. But in any case, there's the question of, when does it provide the highest utility, which is also a hard thing to think about.
Yeah.
I mean, is it more valuable when you're in your 60s and you realize you have some excess wealth to help your child buy a home, or pay off their student loans, or do those things, or just plain start gifting? And whether you use the gift credit or not, you just use the annual exclusion, or you use the unified credit, is a whole nother planning conversation. But I think those are the first three things to think about. And then, of course, you have the behavioral aspects of, is the giftee ready to take on
Right.
funds? Do I need to put some control around it? Do I have to put it in trust because I have a spendthrift? I mean, all these things happen. So it can be very challenging. But I would say the first three things are: A, do you actually have excess wealth? B, are you comfortable giving it away? And then three, what's the right timing
Mm.
for
Those
you?
are,
And these are all individual decisions. There's no template.
that's
There's
exactly
no
what I was
right
going to
answer.
say. Yeah.
And
There's
by the
no
way,
right
the tax
answer to
laws
these
change every
questions.
day. Right now, we have a $28-29 million unified credit. If you do the right estate planning and you're a joint couple, that might be $6 million next year. Now, look,
Right.
for many of you listening, you're like, I don't care how that, even the second number is a crazy number. I get it, but a lot of people have to think about these things.
Yeah. And a lot of people are thinking about these things for the first generation.
Yes, many.
And
Or they were
so
gifted something from their parents, but it wasn't this kind of
it
money.
wasn't this kind of money, and these kind of planning decisions weren't required.
Right.
And so a lot of the conversations that I'm having with clients now who have those millions, they're recognizing that they are the first in their family to have to think about these things.
Hmm.
And all of that is a new muscles building as well.
And it's super
So
stressful. I
super
mean,
stressful. Yeah.
it is
And
super stressful.
it's tough, especially when trust is not yet built. They don't have, they don't have their guy, which is
Right.
typically, go see my guy. They don't have they don't have a financial person.
Which, by the way, as an aside, mostly it is a guy. Hopefully that'll change over
Hopefully
time.
that changes. I know.
I mean, certainly some of us in this industry are trying to change
I
that,
say that phrase
but
in
that's
jest,
not
of
an
course.
offhand
Yeah. No.
remark. Or, I mean,
That's how
most
it's said.
advisors are men.
That's how
And
it's said. That's how I've heard
yeah,
it,
yeah,
and
yes.
so I do hope that is changing. But there's a piece in there that I don't want to brush over, because I think it's a big tension point for for folks who are in this situation. Mark, how do you help clients balance that desire to build wealth for future generations while also ensuring their own financial security? I feel like that to me it is the tension point for a lot of conversations with clients who are at the age where they have wealth. They also aren't confident that their wealth is going to be enough for them. And so, but maybe future generations feel like they're being stingy because they could help, but they're not. What's the way through?
Money is such a funny behavioral topic, and it's
Yeah.
it's such a powerful behavioral topic. Um, you said it already in the enough side of it, but the term I happen to prefer is funded contentment, which was coined by Brian Portnoy over at Shaping Wealth. But
Yeah.
I don't want to take credit for it. Is my point. Um, and Brian deserves some mention. He's an outstanding human being in his own right. But in any case, I think it's a hard thing to do. And to me, running scenarios, technically, I would call it scenario planning, is the way to get there.
Yeah.
By running different scenarios. What happens if we have a 1929 market crash? Do I still have excess wealth? How much? And technically, we're looking at, Monte Carlo analysis. What happens if we have a 1980 to 2000 market where I then build an amazing amount of excess wealth?
Yeah.
And by the way, this period from 2000 to 2024 is a very good period. It has all of the above.
Right.
It has actually 3 significant market events.
Yeah.
The
Despite lots of pessimism in
well, the
as a
pessimism, I
sentiment.
mean, you had the savings and loan and long-term capital management crash of the, 2000 period. You had obviously the 2000 August 2007 through March 2009 period. You had the COVID crash. I mean, we've had very significant events that are not quite equivalent to 1930, but not far off.
Right.
And certainly very similar to the 73, 74 market, which was brutal.
For those of you who remember.
Some of us remember. I was 17 years old. My father, who's a master's degree in economics, was unemployed. But I think the point is you got to understand what your funded contentment really means and how much capital it takes. And then, presuming that you have some excess wealth, comes to the other decisions about what you actually do with it. But that's how we help them balance it, is by, as their advisor, getting comfortable with, there's no way to screw this up.
Mm.
That's kind of what I look at. Is I look at those scenarios of worst to best and say, at worst, there's no way to mess it up. And then year over year, I think as a client, I would want to reevaluate my plan. And this is certainly what we advocate, and see whether you're still on the same track.
Right.
And then when you experience a down market, because you will, in March of 2009, when everything looks like it's never returning, still have excess wealth? The other thing I would say is, and this is my own personal thing, in my own personal experience, I've never missed a dollar I've given away. Because once it's gone, it's gone. You don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's still that fear. And we have many clients that stand in there, and I'm never going to tell them that they're wrong. I'm just going to consistently reinforce, as far as we can tell, with the historical data that we have, you're going to be okay. And you're not only going to be okay, there's this much left.
Yeah.
And now the decision is what to do with it. And if the decision is I'm going to delay, that's okay. If the decision is I'm going to use the annual gift exclusion, okay. Yeah. If the decision is I'm going to give a very significant chunk of this away, and here's why, okay.
No wrong answer.
No wrong answer, and don't sit in judgment of yourself either.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you have an advisor that sits in judgment of you, that's an indicator that I would maybe think about something else. Yeah. Not trying to dunk on anybody, but it is very hard as an advisor to not judge. That's human nature.
Yeah.
It is a muscle you have to develop.
I agree. It's a action born out of, in some ways, necessity, because you are constantly evaluating. So to be able to evaluate and not judge is a skill.
Yes, it really is.
And I think that's the thing that you're saying that it really lands with me is find that kind of advisor is important, because you need an advisor who can evaluate well. You need an advisor who is bright and thoughtful, and also at the same time involves and integrates that human dynamic that says, just because there is a black and white decision doesn't mean that there is a black and white feeling about it.
Well, there is no black and white decision. It may be the math may be clear.
The math, yeah. Yeah. From an analytic standpoint, it may be black and white.
Right.
From a feeling standpoint, it is not. And we have both of those things in the room with us.
Yes.
And neither can be ignored. And so how do we move forward with that? And I think that just to like round out the conversation is a lot of what happens as this wealth gets transferred to the next generation. And not only do you have one person with a black and white analytics, not black and white feelings, but you have now this next generation, this other person, this other incredibly different and evolving financial situation also in the room.
And by the way, this if there are siblings,
More than one.
how they think about each other matters too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been in situations in a family meeting whereby it was clear that the siblings didn't feel comfortable with each other.
Yeah.
And I remember this meeting explicitly where one was like, if all this money flows to you, your husband is going to blow it. Those are some really challenging things to navigate.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in a conversation one time where the parents we were talking about beneficiaries, and there were two kids, older son, younger daughter. And the words that came out of their mouth were, we want to leave X amount. It was twice as much to our son as to our daughter, because our daughter is married into a good family and she's going to be okay. We need to leave more for our son because he's the provider for his family. That was tough to sit on the other side of the table of as an advisor. And
Yeah, that's hard.
and yet at the same time, in that moment, I didn't understand all the family dynamics. If it were me in the advisor seat, I was learning at that time. And so if I'd been in the advisor seat, I certainly would have asked a lot more questions. But there's a lot that to unravel. And there's a lot whenever you're talking about these things, these multi-generational family and wealth transfers. And back to Julie, again, as a nod as we finish this up, that's why people like her are so important in this industry. Just like you have your Ashley Kwame's, who we'll talk to next month about those kind of marital issues that can stand in the way of building wealth together and building happiness and joy around your wealth together. You also have reasons to include and bring on consultants like Julie to help navigate this wealth transfer in a way that doesn't tear apart the family, which I know you've seen.
That's the
I've also seen.
challenge. When you're working with multi-generational families, the family meeting is the place where this all comes together.
Yeah.
And education is crucial. And the sooner the next generation is capable of taking in what that wealth looks like, how you want to steward it, and how you start teaching them how to steward it is the path.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
It's hard.
And so I'm a big proponent of the family meeting.
Yeah.
From that regard. And there's a reason why there are books written about how to hold family meetings and how to do generational wealth transfer. Done casually, it often then has an undesirable outcome, which is why there's the 3-generation conversation that is very prevalent.
Yeah.
And it's happened to some incredibly wealthy families in this country.
On that topic, this is really the end of today's episode. I'm actually going to make sure we put in the show notes the letter that Warren Buffett
just wrote.
I found that to be incredibly inspiring and powerful on this topic. You don't find someone who's going to be transferring more wealth in this day and age than that man right there. And the letter that he wrote, the kindness behind those words, the love, and really just the honor that he had for his family and his legacy, and the order that he put those things in was
Hmm.
truly remarkable. And so we'll share that in our show notes, a link to that. I think if you have not read that, it's certainly something worth considering, regardless of how much money you have. I think it was applicable all the way
I would
down to
tell you
zero.
that if you're being thoughtful about money, period, go back and read the archive of the shareholder letters that Warren Buffett has written over the years.
Yeah,
It's astounding.
it is.
Just the common sense
Mhm.
of he and Charlie Munger, by the way. And Charlie Munger's Almanac is also a fabulous resource.
Mhm.
It's actually on my table here.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the essays of Warren Buffett is in my bookshelf, and I have a book about the family meeting. And I mean, it's try and practice what I preach.
Yeah.
But a wonderful show with Julie, and thanks again. And I hope for you as a listener that this is useful. Um, I will tell you that, and this is only said slightly snarkily, all feedback is a gift.
That's fair.
We welcome it, really
We
and
do.
truly.
We do. Yeah. Yeah. So thanks so much for joining us again. After our little break for the holidays, we hope you also had a chance to recharge.
A big thanks to our amazing guests who agreed to join us on a journey through their career stories on How Did We Get Here?
If you've enjoyed the laughs, surprises, and unexpected turns, be sure to hit subscribe for more intriguing tales.
Your support means the world to us.
Until the next episode, keep asking, keep exploring, and keep wondering.
How did we get here?
This material is distributed for informational purposes only. Investment advisory services offered through Journey Strategic Wealth, a registered investment advisor registered with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. The views expressed are for informational purposes only and do not take into account any individual's personal, financial, or tax considerations. Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and are not intended as investment advice. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Please see Journey Strategic Wealth's Form ADV Part 2A and Form CRS for additional information. This podcast is not intended as and may not be considered to be investment advice and does not constitute a recommendation of any investment strategy or product for a particular investor. The information presented on this program is believed to be factual and up to date, but we do not guarantee its accuracy and it should not be regarded as a complete analysis of the subjects discussed. Discussions should not be construed as an offer to buy or sell or a solicitation of an offer to buy or sell the investments mentioned. Investors should consult a financial professional before making any investment decisions. The opinions are those of the host and interviewees at the time of the podcast recording and are subject to change. These comments should not be construed as recommendations, but as an illustration of broader themes. Forward-looking statements are not guarantees of future results. They involve risks, uncertainties, and assumptions. There can be no assurance that actual results will not differ materially from expectations. Investments involve varying degrees of risks, and there can be no assurance that any specific investment or strategy will be suitable or profitable for our client's portfolio. All investment strategies can result in profit or loss. Just Boss is an investment advisor representative of Wealth Tech Partners, LLC, DBA, Lake Avenue Financial, which is a registered investment advisor and only conducts business in jurisdictions where it is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Mark Newfield is an investment advisor representative of Journey Strategic Wealth, which is a registered investment advisor and only conducts business in jurisdictions where it is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Registration as an investment advisor is not an endorsement of the firm by securities regulators and does not mean the advisor has achieved a specific level of skill or ability. The firm is not engaged in the practice of law or accounting. You should always consult an attorney or tax professional regarding your specific legal or tax situation.